Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1999 science fiction film Existenz. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Kanan for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my Patreon or my PayPal. The link for both will be in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Existenz is a film that I was definitely aware of his existence for quite a long time because I'm a big fan of David Cronenberg and I like a lot of his films. And I remember seeing the trailer for this and it looked kind of trippy. And then I also remember checking out some articles. I don't know if there was a novelization of it. Part of me is thinking that there was, and I might have read it, but I could be just mixing that up with something else. But for whatever reason, it never really wound up near the top of my watch list. I think a large part is because even though I thought it looked kind of trippy, I wasn't really that sold by the film, by the trailer. And I definitely wasn't that into the cast. Jennifer Jason Leigh and Jude Law, nothing against the two of them. They're good actors, but they just don't really have that charisma, that pull to really be compelling leads, at least not from what I saw in the trailer. So it was one of those things where I was like, okay, maybe if I catch it for cheap somewhere, maybe I'd, pick it up and watch it one of these days. And after finally seeing it, uh, honestly, my fears when it comes to the movie are pretty warranted because I wasn't that big on the two leads. I didn't really feel that they were that charismatic or compelling enough to carry the film. And other than some trippy visuals, I just felt like the concept of the film, while it was interesting, it just wasn't utilized that well. It's one of those frustrating films that you watch it and there are moments and smatterings of brilliance and fully fleshed out and realized ideas. But then there's just so many moments in the movie where things never fully coalesce in a satisfying fashion. So it's not what I would say a film that I hated, but it is a film that I was ultimately disappointed by, to be honest. And it starts with Cronenberg, and it's crazy to sit here and say that because I love a lot of his work. I mean, his remake of The Fly is one of my favorite films of all time. I think he did some great work with other films like The Brood, and even though I'm not as big on Scanners as other people are, I still think that was pretty decent. I even liked some of his earlier work like Shivers, or his art house indie films like Crash. Um, and of course, Videodrome. Videodrome is a classic. I think that's a great movie. So Cronenberg is very capable of some really high caliber work. But his direction in this is some of his most flat and relatively uninspired work of his career to date. It's just so boring and safe. And for a film that takes place in virtual reality for a good chunk of the running time, I was really surprised by how little Cronenberg played around in this sandbox visually. How he was very singular, how he was very one note when it comes to his camera work and his selection of shots. Other than a few scenes with a game pod or some sequences that took place in the video game realm, a lot of the shots in this film they blend together. They look very similar, and they are just shot in a way that, from the way that he shot the scenes with the selected angles or the selected perspectives, yeah, it's a little more realistic, but it makes the film into something that is just nowhere near as fascinating or as intriguing to watch visually. And for a movie that one of its biggest selling points is that it's a Cronenberg video game film, that's that's not really living up to the full potential of the concept. And I think I get what Cronenberg is trying to do. I think he's purposely choosing to be more realistic and grounded with his visuals, but that doesn't add that much to this film because the virtual reality landscape of existence or transcendence, the way that it's shot isn't really that much different from the real world. So it's not a stretch anymore that Jude Law's character Pikel could escape or pause the existence and then go back to the real world and be unable to differentiate between the two because they look the same anyway. So it's like it's one of those things where that's not much of a stretch. And I think maybe that's kind of the point there is that they're trying to make it so the lines blur between reality and the game world. And I think at times that there are some effective shots that Cronenberg does manage to mine out of that. But there's a lot of moments where visually it's just flat. I'm just going to be honest, especially in comparison to a lot of Cronenberg's other films. Even his films that he did that weren't science fiction after this, like some of his more dramatic work, like Eastern Promises, for instance, or A History of Violence. But yeah, it's not a badly directed film. It's just a movie that is just inconsistent in terms of the directing quality, where you'll have moments where it shines, but then you'll have other moments where it doesn't look that great or it genuinely is bad, like the Civil War scenes, for instance. Those sequences really sucked. They looked incredibly cheap. They looked like something that was shot on a dime store dollar budget. Cronenberg just seemed like he was sleepwalking through the direction of those sequences. And it led to that whole sequence just not being that thrilling or exciting in any capacity because the direction is just so flat and uninspired. Um, but yeah, I wanted more craziness. I wanted more surreal visuals and just attempts to just really play with the camera. And the fact that it's taking place in a video game world, that really lends itself to Cronenberg just being a total madman. And he's just sane. He's just relatively sane with his camera work here and safe. And I don't personally feel it works. Just like I definitely don't feel the screenplay works that well as a whole. And it's very frustrating. Like the script is easily the most frustrating aspect of Existenz because you have some moments of genuine brilliance and genius. You have some good subtext here and there, some nice moments of social commentary about video games and how people will become so obsessed and attached to them that it's literally a part of them. Or how games can become so compelling and so enthralling that they replace people's lives and people are more interested in what's going on in the game world than they are in their own, this kind of stuff. But in execution, it's so sloppy. And there are moments with the subtext and with the commentary where it just really feels like Cronenberg is just going through the motions and he's just recycling bits from other films that he's written or directed previously, specifically Videodrome. Like, there are moments in this script where it honestly reads like it's just poor man's Videodrome. Instead of it being mass media and television that's the focus, it's video games. And that doesn't cut it for me personally. And I think a reason for that is Cronenberg was rusty. He had not written a film since Videodrome. So he was going back to the well. This is something that a lot of writers do if they haven't written something in a long time. They tend to kind of go back to the well, recycle some things, dip their toe in the water for a little bit until they branch out a little bit more and experiment and do some more daring work. And that's why you have a lot of these moments where it just feels and plays out like Videodrome or some other films that he's already done or other films that have been done since Videodrome. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I think that's great writing. It isn't. It's very lazy. It's lazy writing. And on top of that, I think Cronenberg was just a bad fit for a video game movie because he is completely in the weeds here. He does not know what he's talking about most of the time, except for the bare minimum, superficial little things about game mechanics, like NPCs being weird and having weird accents, or only responding to you if you call them by their name, or moments where, as the player, in order for the plot to move along, you don't have control, or sequences where the game glitches and dialogue repeats itself. Other than that, there is nothing in this script when it comes to the game Existenz or the game Transcendence or whatever game that's on the screen that plays out like an actual video game. It really just seems like you're just forced to watch cutscenes. And without the right context, without attaching exciting or compelling or enthralling gameplay with the cutscenes, that's pretty boring. And a lot of people will attest that if a game features mostly just cutscenes as gameplay, it's not a good game. And so that's just so disappointing to me. That's the biggest disappointment when it comes to this film. Because even with the direction of the movie, I could maybe point to the fact that it's a low budget movie and maybe Cronenberg just didn't have as much to work with budget wise. And that explains why some scenes look cheaper than others, or why he didn't take more risks with the camera, and so on. But when it comes to the screenplay, uh, you can't blame the budget. Like, this is all due to what Cronenberg brings to the script, and he brings to it inexperience when it comes to video games. You can just see it. I would not be surprised at all if he had never played a game. He'd never picked up a single video game before he decided to write this script. And I never felt that way about mass media or television with Cronenberg. And for good reason, because he has experience in that medium. He has no experience whatsoever in the medium of video games. And it really does show with this screenplay. And I feel he should have consulted somebody. I feel he should have reached out. He should have gotten a hold of or gotten in contact with a writer in the industry who was really into games, or maybe a video game writer, get them on board so that he can really understand and see what makes a game tick, what makes a video game good, what makes a video game bad, what makes gameplay of a game exciting and fun. Like, throw in some first person stuff. Just do more than just show scenes that just feel like they're just from a regular movie. Like, what is the point of having a video game concept when you're not even going to utilize it to the best of its ability? It's like you have a great idea here to make a film that's compelling and interesting, and you did a really good job bringing the audience along initially. by stringing them along, by getting them invested in what the gameplay would look like. I will give Cronenberg credit for how the film starts and how it doesn't show you the gameplay and how it just shows the game pod and has the moment in the beginning where the renegade shoots somebody who works for the company and tries to kill Allegra Geller, and Allegra and Ted Peichel then go on the run, and there are these little bits and pieces of the script that are just throwing you little hints or throwing you little teases of what the gameplay or what the game could be. That's good. That's some really solid writing. But it drops the ball once you actually get to the gameplay, because other than maybe, like I said, just some superficial little elements of gameplay, the video game sequences fall incredibly flat. Uh, Other than maybe one scene, I will give Cronenberg the sequence at the Chinese restaurant where Peichel builds the gun out of uh, uh, mutant amphibian parts. I will give Cronenberg that. That sequence is shocking. That's subversive. It's a scene that really does make you go, "What the hell?" And it's gory. It's violent. It's everything that I love about Cronenberg. Even the stuff previous to that scene, like I said, the moment at the conference and where the guy tries to kill Geller with the gun that has uh, teeth for bullets. Um, that works, but once you get to the actual gameplay, it just falls apart. I mean, even the stuff leading up to the gameplay that doesn't even involve the game just yet, just the suspense of Peichel getting an illegal port installed. Even that works. But once you get to the gameplay itself, other than maybe a few moments and maybe one scene, it's boring. It's not that exciting. It's not that compelling, and it doesn't really feel or play out like an actual video game. So when it comes to the scenes where you have these characters talking about how addicting the game is and how, they would live the game more than they would want to live their own life, or they would kill for it, it makes no sense, because the gameplay, to be perfectly honest, sucks. It's like a game that would get a bad rating on IGN, or a game that I would quit playing not even halfway through. So it's like one of those things where, yeah, this is totally 100% a noob, like a gaming noob who has not played much games or any games at all, that is writing a video game movie. It's pretty hard to watch at times, and it's kind of brutal. And I just don't get it. I don't know why Cronenberg wasn't able to put his ego aside, especially since he hadn't written a film in forever anyway. Like, he didn't seem to have a problem working with other writers for many years up until this film. Why not get somebody else on board who's more in tune with video games, so you could have a more compelling film that has more of an idea of what makes video games tick? And I know it's supposed to be virtual reality, but even in VR games, things aren't necessarily this boring. And the twist ending, I will also give Cronenberg some kudos for, because it is one of those like double twist endings, but I still think it works, even though it's one that I predicted it kind of halfway through, but I didn't necessarily predict the other half. I do like how the twist ending, it ties everything together in terms of the various different characters that you saw throughout the script. I thought that was relatively clever. Um, but it doesn't necessarily make up for the meat of the script just being so poor. I know some people might consider this to be too harsh of a criticism, but that's how I feel about it. I think it's a really bad video game portion of this film. Um, and that's why it's such a letdown. Why it's so frustrating, because this is a good idea. I like the idea of this. I like the concept of the film. I also think another a moment where the script is a letdown is with the characters. Allegra Geller and Peichel, whether it was by design or not, they're not really characters that you root for. They're not characters that you're that emotionally invested in. So that doesn't really add to the overall enticement of the story either. It detracts from it in a considerable way. There's some interesting things about how Allegra, she's so disconnected from reality that she is starting to confuse the real world for the game world, or she's just acting like stuff that happens in reality is just this unbelievable, amazing thing that she's never seen before. But that only goes so far. It's very surface level characterization. Peichel, he's honestly, he might as well be an NPC. He's that nothing of a character other than the twist at the end with his character that they throw in there to try to make him more interesting. But up until that point, he honestly is written in a way where it seems like he's Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory, who is just interacting with the film, and that honestly is kind of annoying because he has the way that he says lines, or the lines that he's given by Cronenberg, they just sound so unnatural. It sound like, he's just trying to sound smart, and it doesn't click for me. And he's supposed to be this outsider. This guy's never played games before. But as soon as he plays Existenz, he pauses it once, and now he can't differentiate between the game world and reality. And now he's hooked already. I'm like, that is way too soon for that to happen. The script should have taken its time a little bit more. Also, with the way the gameplay is, I don't know why he would be hooked so much, because it's not really that exciting or fun or compelling when it comes to the narrative or what's happening, other than the scene where he shoots the Asian guy in the face with the bone gun. Okay, all right. Other than that, what, you work at a fish factory? Great. It's so exciting. You go to a video game store? Like, it's just one of those things where, yeah, it's just such a letdown when it comes to the gameplay aspect of the movie. And yes, I know there are scenes where it's meta and it points out certain things like the bad acting, or, the other aspects of gaming. That doesn't mean that Cronenberg actually knows what makes a good game, let alone a bad one. Because it's just stuff that is just tossed in there to have it, to make and create this illusion of a script that knows its stuff, that knows gaming, and also gaming culture. That's another thing that is just a complete and total miss when it comes to this script, especially around this time, like the focus group that they chose and all these other these so-called players. I'm like, where are the teenagers? Where's the younger audience? Like, gaming was definitely more of a younger audience thing. Like, there were adults that played games too, but like, let's be honest here. Like, a good chunk of that focus group should have been teenagers. But instead it's like people who work at the local office supply store, or work in an office setting. Like, it was bizarre. It was just kind of like, okay. And I guess that was the only way they could set it up, so they could connect the dots when it comes to the twist at the end. But you could have some teenage characters be involved. But I honestly feel that a lot of teenagers probably wouldn't play Existenz anyway, because they would think that it's boring. So maybe that's why. But regardless, even if that's the case, like, they should have still been incorporated more into the script, and that just shows you just how out of the loop Cronenberg is when it comes to gaming. And that's the big focal point. That's the big focus. That's the big reason why this film exists in the first place, is that it's a David Cronenberg take on video games and video game culture and gaming and society and the differentiating factors between reality and augmented reality. And it just is such a uh, misfire. It really is. Like it's kind of a dud in that realm. It's fine when it comes to console, talking about how the console was a living thing and it's made out of living parts, and how people are connected to it in a way where it's almost like an umbilical cord. Like there's some good stuff there, and compelling, interesting things, but the execution is just so incredibly inconsistent and lacking most of the time. And that's why Cronenberg was just the wrong guy to write this video game movie at the time. Like, he is just shoving a square peg into a round hole throughout the majority of this script, and it's painful to watch sometimes. It really is. And the weak characters don't do it any favors. I know it's a game and they're not trying to give away the twist or give away any of this other stuff, but games actually do have more depth for characters. Like, give them give the audience more of a reason to care about these characters. Also, give the audience more of a reason to care about the stakes. That's the other thing. Like, other than, throwing in this disease pod thing randomly and trying to set that up as, oh my god, it's disease and it's going to spread its spores and kill everybody. Other than that, there's not really any stakes other than, oh, I need to save my game. And what we see of the game isn't great, so it's not like we really care whether the game dies or not. So, yeah, it really is a letdown from a storytelling perspective. Now, the cast for Existenz, they're game, no pun intended, but they can only do so much with what they're given, and it's not much. Like, they're not given a lot to work with when it comes to this script. So what you have are performances that at best are just kind of there. Jennifer Jason Leigh, Jude Law. I'm not going to really be too hard on them for their performances as Allegra Geller and Ted Pikel, because, like I said, the script doesn't really give these characters a lot of depth or really a lot of a reason at all to root for them, let alone hate them. It's just one of those things where it just makes you so indifferent when it comes to these characters and their fate and what's happening to them, that the performances just aren't really able to rise above that, even despite some decent effort. Like, I feel Jennifer Jason Leigh, uh, I would say she's probably the best performer out of the cast, other than Willem Dafoe in his little role as Gas, because she shows the most layers. There are moments where she's genuinely just out there in kind of a eerie way, and she just shows you what it could be like if somebody literally does not know what the difference is anymore between reality and augmented reality. The way that she carries herself, the way that she reacts in the game world versus outside of it. She creates a lot of different dynamics with her performance. And it makes the character interesting to watch at least once, just to see what she does and how she plays around with this character and how she chooses to play the acting game with Allegra Geller. With Ted Pikel, though, from Jude Law, I've never really felt he was that charismatic of an actor anyway. I felt some of his best roles is when he's just playing a robot or some rendition of that. and this is no exception. He's okay, he's decent, but he's nothing great. He's not compelling. He's not that charismatic, but he's not somebody that you hate watching. And the acting isn't bad. It's just one of those things where it's just there. It's it's okay. It's fine for what it is. Feel the same way about Ian Holm and Don McKellar, uh, or Sarah Polley or Christopher Eccleston. Willem Dafoe, though, I really liked his performance as the gas station attendant guy. Even the performance that he did where he was playing the normal guy and he was talking about how convincing he was playing a crazy person, like that was fun too. Honestly, he was good enough. I wanted to see more of Willem Dafoe. I also liked Oscar Hisu as the Chinese waiter. I wanted to point out that role and that performance because I think our performance is a little underrated. Um, the film, it looks okay when it comes to cinematography by Peter Shasinski. I think I butchered his last name, but it is what it is. Peter's cinematography, it works with what Cronenberg's vision was for the film. The movie's very dark. The movie's very grimy looking. So the movie has this very dark, almost grayscale look to it at times. And there's a few moments where it does have some color, but there's a lot of scenes where it just kind of is shot in a dingy, dark way, and it doesn't really lend itself to some cinematography that's particularly that incredible or eye catching. The editing by Ronald Sanders, I thought was actually pretty solid, especially when it comes to any of the sequences that involved it, anything that was remotely weird or had any sort of semblance of action. Um, and the scenes where the characters are transitioning from the real world to the game world when it comes to the way that the characters jump into the game. Those were edited very efficiently and effectively, and it was a well edited film. In a lot of ways, the movie, from a technical standpoint, even though I'm not really a big fan of it, it is a lot, in all honesty, a well oiled machine. It's just the script and the story I felt was just very lacking in a lot of key areas. The score by Howard Shore, not one of my favorites of his, but it was atmospheric. It was moody. It worked for the film and for what Cronenberg was trying to get across with it. But it's definitely not one of my favorite scores by him, and it's not really a score that has any memorable notes. So it is kind of a disappointment in that regard, considering Howard Shore has done so many great scores. I mean, his score for The Fly is still one of my favorite scores that I've ever heard in anything. And that's such an emotional, just powerful, poignant score. And this is just kind of there. Like a lot of elements of the movie, which, it's disappointing because I know Shore is capable of doing so much more with a score, but at the same time, I don't think that's what Cronenberg was asking him to do. So, for, just some ambiance, it's it's an all right score. It is. But it's not something I'm going to sit down and listen to on its own. And the film, it's thankfully only 97 minutes. I definitely do feel that if it was any longer, it would really suffer because, like I said, the gameplay is not compelling for the most part. Um, but it still goes by an all right enough of a pace. It has a good beginning, a good start, and then it sputters and just really struggles to gain ground in the middle, and then kind of picks up a little bit more by the end. Yeah, it's just one of those movies where it really is. It's a disappointment. It's I'm glad it exists because you get to see some trippy, cool visual or practical effects. Like the game pods were definitely something that was very unnerving and striking when it comes to the imagery. The bone gun, I thought that was a great effect, a great looking design on that. Um, And the idea of a thinking man's sci-fi film that takes place inside a video game world is an intriguing one. It's a good concept. It's just not ever fully realized with this movie. And knowing what Cronenberg is capable of, knowing that he can do films that are compelling and interesting and just enthralling throughout, from either a directorial standpoint or a writing standpoint, Existenz is just one of those films where it just doesn't really do it for me. Like I can't even say that I like the film, but I can't say that I hated it. It's just a film that at the end of the day, it just really wasn't my cup of tea, so to speak. It's not the game that I would personally choose to play again. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Existenz. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.